Cool. Today, my talk's about, it's called Serious Gaming. It's kind of about building educational games in JavaScript. Has anybody here ever built a game in JavaScript, even just for fun? Cool. There was like 10 people in the audience that had done it. It's fun. There's one guy going crazy, so it's good. He sounded like he had some fun with it. Yeah, so kind of the main things that I want to talk to you today is about, it's kind of a journey how over a weekend I became a game developer, and how you guys too can become game developers and make games for learning. I think there's not enough games for actually learning stuff. So about 2 years ago, I moved to Thailand. And I never spoke Thai. I didn't know how to read or write Thai. I don't know. Anybody here know how to read Thai? There's like 2, 3. OK, there's a couple of people. Cool. So I came, and I come to this new country, and I'm like, OK, I want to make some friends, and I want to start talking to people. And nowadays, nobody calls each other, right? We don't talk on the phone. We're always on like WhatsApp or Line or Kakao Chat or whatever. And what I found was, I wanted to talk to people, and my conversations always ended up like this, where you have these here too, yeah? Where all we do is we just send stickers to each other. Like, OK, this is great. Like, OK, I'm hungry. I'm sad, you know? And you can kind of get some of the way with stickers, but I really wanted to like learn how to write and like how to type. So what ended up happening was, I was like, you know what, I'm a programmer. Why don't I just make a game to make myself be able to learn Thai? So I actually built a Thai typing game. Well, I first went on the internet, and there's been like 2 typing games made in the last 10 years, and they're both awful. And I was like, this can't be that hard. Why don't I try this out? If you guys have ever seen, well, this is actually a picture of the game. So this is a copy of the game on iOS. It's a pretty simple game, but it's kind of a lot of fun and just a really quick way to like incrementally grow Thai and learn a keyboard. And you may be asking yourself, why is it difficult? Why would you go through all this trouble of building your own app to like learn how to write Thai? Well, this is the Thai alphabet. And that's not 2 copies of the same keyboard. It's 2 keyboards. So like you literally have to hit the meta key to get some of the characters, right? So like when I started typing, I wasn't hunting and pecking. I was like sitting there for like 5 minutes. Like every key press would be like, I don't know where Go Guy is. So I was like, oh man, this has to be better. It has to be better. It has to be a better way to do this. And that's kind of what started my journey of building this game. So just really quick, a little bit of background about me. I'm a server-side developer. I mostly write Go. And you might be asking yourself, why is a Go developer here talking about JavaScript? I love JavaScript. And my main day job is writing server-side code. So like, it's a nice like weekend thing to write JavaScript, particularly front-end stuff. You know, just kind of totally different element. I have a book coming out later this year called Microservices in Go. You should check it out. And I live in Bangkok. Cool. How many people here are gamers? Yeah! Cool. We have I figured there would be a lot of people in the audience that are big gamers. And you know, I mean, there's a lot of types of games, right? There's games like World of Warcraft where, you know, you're just, you know, you're grinding, you're doing things, and people play World of Warcraft because it's fun, it's social, they get into it, and like they play with their friends. But there's like this huge spectrum of kinds of games. So I don't know if this game was really big in Singapore, but it's the #1 game in Thailand, and it's a Japanese cat game. It's called Nico Atsume. And all you do is you put stuff around and you collect cats. And people spend hours playing this game. And what's crazy is there's no Thai. It's only in Japanese. There's no English subtitles or anything, but people have learned how to play this game just because they think that it's really fun. And you'll see people on the subway in Thailand, and they'll spend like 30 minutes just playing this game, and it blows my mind. And this game, the only thing I can think of is just for time wasting. But I want to talk about something that what I'm really passionate about, which is serious gaming. And serious gaming is building educational games for learning. Whereas, like, when we're taught math as a kid, like we do our math facts and like we have to like do the questions and the answers, and we're like, why can't we make this fun? Instead of just giving somebody a gold sticker, like why can't we actually make an interactive game that like helps people like learn how to do math or how to read or do these kinds of things, right? And so when I was growing up, we had like Atari 2s, Apple 2s, excuse me. And we had lots of really fun educational games. And I don't know what's happened because I feel like they've kind of gone away in a sense. So like when I was growing up, I don't know, has anybody played any of these games, by the way? Yeah, okay, those are good people. There's some older people here in the audience. These are really old, though. There's like Oregon Trail and Carmen Sandiego and Math Blasters. And the best one, my favorite one, was always Number Munchers. And it was just a game that taught you multiplication and addition, but you didn't think it was a game. You just played it because it was fun, and then all of a sudden you knew all of your multiplication tables. It was really kind of a crazy idea. But there was like tons of these games, and they were really easy. Like these ran on like 1 megahertz computers, and it's like, why can't we on the web now remake games like this for kids? Like why can't we make it fun for kids and people to learn things? And there's this kind of other area of gaming is gamification. I know a lot of people probably build business apps. Does anybody here use gamification like in their apps at all? Not many, actually, just 3 or 4 people. Okay. So gamification is kind of like this thing that's come out over the last years. And I don't think is as effective at education, but basically gamification is we want to give rewards. We want to give points. We want to, like, you check in, you become a mayor. Like, we have an app in America called Foursquare where you check in, and you become a mayor of a building. And it's all around points and games. And I feel like it's fun, but at a certain point, if your bank website gives you points for, like, checking your checking account, at a certain point, you're just going to get really bored with getting points on every single thing that you do. And it's really cool. So, I mean, we do some of these kinds of things. Like, you still want to have, like, level ups and points and being able to share to your friends. But I really think the future of educational gaming is about making the games fun. How do we make a World of Warcraft that teaches you how to do geography or something like this? Like, that's what I really would like to see. And the whole reason, and obviously this is a JavaScript conference, so yes, I am going to get to actual JavaScript programming. So why JavaScript? Has everybody read this book, by the way, JavaScript, The Good Parts? Come on, there should be more people in the audience. This is absolutely the most important book you'll ever read on JavaScript. I'm not even a JavaScript guy, and I love, this is like the one book that I love. But why did I pick JavaScript? Like, like I've done C++, I've done C#, I've done all of the stuff. I could write a native app. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, I wanted to build this in a weekend. I wanted to just do this without any trouble, and I wanted to do it fast. And I was like, this is really the reason I did it in JavaScript. It's because every time I make a change in my code, the app just reloads itself. It's like interactive programming. It's kind of like what they've always talked about in having a good IDE is like, as I'm changing the code, I have a bigger monitor at home. So I literally just keep the app on one side, and I keep the JavaScript on the other. And every time my editor saves, I actually use this thing called browser sync. I don't know, does anybody here use browser sync or something similar? It's like, oh, okay, so this table over here is like, they raise their hand for everything. So they're probably very advanced, or they like raising their hands. So. Yeah, so browser sync in Gulp, you should really check it out. Because basically, for like 10 lines of code, you can point it at your asset folders. And I even do like asset compilation, even if you're doing CoffeeScript or whatever. It will automatically just reload the browser. And what's cool is that it actually inserts JavaScript into your HTML page. And that JavaScript has like notifications. So like if something changes on the file system, it actually pings the code in the browser and reloads the browser. So like if you're building a game, what I do is I just like disable all the menus and all this stuff, and I always just have the game levels pop up. So like as you're coding, you're like, oh no, the character, he's like 10 pixels too high. Well, let me change the 10 pixels, and literally like in a second you'll see that the 10 pixels come down. You know, it's not like if you guys have built like a game in like C++, you're like, okay, well now I'm gonna like recompile the whole thing, and I'm gonna wait 5 minutes, and oh no, I didn't get it. It wasn't 10 pixels, it was actually 12 pixels off, and stuff like this. So I think that was one of the biggest things that like JavaScript, there's no way I could have built this game in like 3 days. The first version was literally 3 days. Like, so this has kind of always been my sticking point about JavaScript. I don't know, does anybody here find like JavaScript projects get pretty messy if they get really large? Like it just kind of becomes like this big ball of mud of chaos a lot of times. And like all of a sudden you're in like this class and it's actually attaching something to the window that's used in like 6 classes away, and nobody knows because it was written 5 years ago. And like, and this has always been like my pain whenever I've come into a lot of JavaScript projects. And I'm sure a lot of people here are using it, but I use this tool called Require.js. And what Require.js lets you do is like, you make sure that each class is kind of very separate, and you can kind of separate your different parts of the code very cleanly. So for a game, games come out pretty cleanly. So like, you know, the hero is a distinct class. You know, each monster is a distinct class. You know, each kind of level is a class. Even things like the kinds of labels that we have. Like we have special like scoring labels and stuff like this. And it really kind of gave a really nice way of structuring the whole program. So it felt a little bit more like being in a structured language like C++ or I do Go, but still got a lot of the speed and development of JavaScript. So I don't know if anybody's here, if you've looked at JavaScript game development libraries. When I came into this project, I was like, all right, there has to be a nice game development library in JavaScript. So of course I go on Google and I look, and there's only 300. So this should be easy to pick from. So I think I got, by about the 3rd one, I was just like, all right, I think it's just faster just to pick it and start programming. So I don't have like a huge extensive knowledge of all of them. I tried a couple like Impact.js, but I ended up with this one called Create.js. And what's kind of cool is it's written by some guys that used to do Flash. This guy named G. Skinner. And since he was a Flash developer, he kind of had all the ideas about what are the core elements of like building interactive applications. You know, like how do I make things animate? How do I have like transitions? How do I have tweens? And just really just very small core building blocks. It doesn't try to be like, I don't know if you've seen other game libraries where they're like, you know, you end up just making JSON files to control levels, or if you use like Unity, maybe you like try to like use some GUI app. Like it's just like the bare kind of fundamentals that you would need. And since not a lot of people have actually built games here, I'm going to kind of talk about really the small fundamentals of building a game, just a 2D game. You know, this is like all Mario area stuff, so like it's not advanced and it's really easy and it's kind of fun. So kind of one of the main building blocks of a game is you have to have animations, right? So we have monsters in the game and we have characters, and basically what boils down is you have these things and they're called Sprite Sheets. You know, they can be cells or whatever. But basically what happens is you have like a giant horizontal image. So like each one of these 5 things here is one image. And basically you break down the frames of the image into like separate blocks. So if it's by 40 by 40, you're lining it up and you say like 40, and then at 80 pixels there's the second picture, and at 120 pixels there's the third picture, right? So as you do these, but what's also cool is you might have multiple different animations in one file. So like if we look at the monster there, we have two animations. We have one where he's like chomping, and then we have one where he's dying. And we look at each of them, we have like, but sometimes we might not, whereas like on the third one down, we just have one long, really, really long animation. So we can kind of mix these up how we want. And what's kind of cool is the code is really easy for this. So like, we're looking at the monster, we're actually looking at one of the monkeys, and in the framework, all you're doing is you're defining which frames go to each animation. So you say like, frames 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go to the run, and you can even reuse them. So sometimes maybe the jump shares some of the run animations. And then you just set up names, and then we just create a hero with the sprite sheet. And you place them on the screen. And that's as simple as creating animations. And when you want to play it, so like, let's say that we're playing through the game, and we kill the monster, right? To actually just kill the monster, to run the animation, you run one line of code. And it's called go to and stop. So it runs the animation, and it goes to the end of the animation. And it's that simple. Like, it's 15 lines of code to set up an animation and to place it on the screen, and then one line of code every time you want to play it. So it's about as simple as it can get. And that's kind of one of the things that I want to kind of convey through this whole thing is basically, it's pretty easy. Like, it seems daunting. Like, you see games, and like, you don't have to make like 3D Unreal game. Like, there's a lot of fun 2D games. It's like the cat game we showed earlier. There's no like advanced technology that could have been made on a Super Nintendo, you know? So kind of the next building block that we have in kind of 2D game programming is called the parallax scrolling. And this is kind of like, if you ever played Super Mario Brothers, I don't know, how many people, I don't know if that's too old in this audience. Okay, cool. Actually, more than half the audience has played this. Good. So basically, the whole idea of Super Mario is Mario doesn't really move that much. It's really the background of the screen that moves. So I just want to really quickly show. So like, this is actually the game, right? So like, this is actually all those elements put together inside of one of the levels in the game. But if we break it down into pieces, it's really 4 different graphics that are really wide. And kind of the idea with a parallax is that you have different parts of the screen, and they move at different speeds. So the clouds might be moving really slow, the city scene might be moving very quickly, and then the middle city scene might be moving just a little bit slower, and then the ground just barely moves, right? And it creates this effect as though you're walking through the screen, but all you're doing is you're just shifting different elements. And what's kind of cool is that it ends up being like a circle. So like the clouds, we don't have infinite number of clouds, right? We're just basically circling around a circle. So we like are just showing a portion of the clouds at any point in the time. So maybe like on this screen here, we might be showing maybe a quarter of those clouds, especially on iOS where you don't have that much resolution. So as you can see, we're only seeing like a very, very, very small fraction of each piece. But it kind of moves around, and it kind of gives the impression is that you're really kind of moving through this city scene. So let's talk about the code, and once again, this is really easy. So basically, for Parallax, you basically are just, for each one, you give it a name, you give it the dimensions, and you give it the speed, the rate that it's going to be moving. So some are going to be moving at, point so many milliseconds, and each one will be moving at different milliseconds. And then the actual implementation of Parallax itself is only 10 lines of code in JavaScript. You're basically just taking the velocity, and you're basically just moving it around the x-axis at the velocity that it needs to go. So like, and if it loops around, we just start over from the beginning. So it's really, really easy. It didn't even have a Parallax implementation. I just got this off the internet. It was like 10 lines of code. It's really fun, though. So now we have kind of the main building blocks of like a 2D game. Like we have the characters, we can make the characters animate and move, and we can move the background as though we're walking through the screen. Now, how does the main game loop work in a game? So kind of games are kind of built around state machines. So basically what happens is every time there's a clock tick, so usually you'll divide a game into like 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second, and you'll have an event, which is your clock tick. In Create.js, they call it the update function. And once every, so like if we have 60 frames a second, so once every 1/60th of a second, we'll get an event. And basically what we'll do is we'll decide at that point in time if we need to do an animation or maybe we need to scroll the screen some. And basically, we're just doing it at fractions of a second. And the main game loop, as you can see here, you maybe can't see the code great, but it's only maybe about 50 lines of code. And we'll just kind of talk through just kind of the main elements of how a game loop actually works. So like, as I said, it's a state machine. So like, for example, if somebody had hit the pause button, the function shouldn't do anything, right? So it starts there. And then if we're in the middle of a monster dying, so like an event, so like a monster dies, well, that's not instantaneous, right? Because it may take a second, it may take a half a second for the animation to play through. So you have to maintain these states, and you have to see if we're done yet with each of these kinds of states. And then for each kind of thing on the screen, now granted, like, this is a pretty simple game, so like I explicitly mention each monster and each hero. Like if you were building a bigger game, you would have like a linked list or a map of like all the objects that you would have on the screen, and you would iterate over them. But basically what you're going to do is you talk to each object, and you tell the object to render itself. And basically in like the hero or in the monster, they know about time. So the hero, he's running. So like every so often, he'll be changing frames of his run. Or if it's the monster, he'll have to be checking to see if the hero intersects with the box. So like if the monster and the hero touch each other, the hero dies, right? These kinds of things. So like each of these classes is like responsible for its own functionality. And it kind of breaks in like that. So then, yeah, so then there's the collided. So we might do things, we might play an audio, we might lower the health. And for our game, since we're building something that actually is tracking words per minute, we're going to start calculating the words per minute and update any labels. So like we have labels on the screen. If I come back here, we have labels on the screen like the time, the words per minute, how many points we have, and we have to kind of keep track of those, and like every time we do an update. And then the very last thing is we iterate over all the parallax layers that we talked about earlier, and we make sure that they get updated. So like we just talk to the parallax, which we talked about here, and the parallax knows how to render itself. What's kind of cool is like the main game loop just kind of knows about objects, and then each object is kind of responsible for its own rendering. It's kind of very similar to like when you guys do like Angular or any of these other component frameworks. But now we can do this with like games, and it's pretty straightforward if you've done any kind of other game development. So that's kind of the main loop. That's basically all the main things you need to like break down a game. And we've talked about maybe 150 lines of code for the core of a 2D game. That's pretty reasonable for anybody starting out to just like flip through, right? So cool. So I want to talk about some of the other cool, fun libraries that I found for doing game development with this. There's another library called Creatine. And once you start to get a more complex game, like so once I started to have multiple levels and stuff, I wanted to be able to like actually manage the levels in a sane way. And this Creatine framework allows you to do like level management, transitions between levels. It can even do things like, did anybody play like the old Final Fantasies where like you have like this 2D, yeah, who played them? Yeah, I see a couple people smiling. So like the old Final Fantasy games were all, they call it isomorphic, where you're looking at an overworld, and you move through this overworld, and it has kind of cool things for that. So if you guys are like, if anybody's thinking about like building like a 3D, like not 3D, but like an old style RPG, like there's classes where like you just spin up and you just give it some graphics, and all of a sudden you have like an old style RPG like right out of the box. So I'll talk about kind of what I ended up using it for. I ended up using it for managing levels. And what's really cool is like they have this thing called the level manager in the director. And you set up all your types of levels, and you can even make things like the main entry screen to the application and the settings screen are kind of levels, and you can shift between them. So like you can kind of make them, you can almost think of it as like if it was like divs of different pages and you're replacing them. It just handles like transitioning, like say if we want to transition like after every level, you want to have a level complete, right? So you want to transition into a level complete and then transition into the next type of level. And this kind of framework just kind of gives you a really easy way of handling that and keeping that in a nice, clean, kind of more object-oriented fashion. So there was a whole talk on this, which was great. I hope everybody heard the talk this morning, which was really great. How many people are actually using PhoneGap or Cordova for production stuff? Oh, that's cool. There's actually quite a bit of people. Yeah. It's really exciting. Like, if you haven't checked it out, and you might be like, well, why did you build an HTML game, and then why do you need to use Cordova? Why don't you just put it on the web? Wouldn't that be awesome? So I started off, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I built it on OS X. I built the whole app in a weekend. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I don't really type Thai on my OS X. I always type on my phone, because I'm always talking with my friends if I'm talking in Thai. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm just going to throw this on iOS. It's going to be no problem. Like, of course, I threw it on there, and like 95% of it worked, right? And it's like, this is always the one thing that always is annoying with JavaScript. There's always this, like that last couple percent. So there was a couple issues that when I ran into when I originally put it on iOS. So things like the native keyboard. So one of the things is a lot of typing games, if you look on the App Store, I don't know if anybody's ever played, they make their own fake keyboards, which is really annoying because I like the iOS keyboard, and I really want to learn how to type on that. I don't want to learn how to type on a fake keyboard. So if you want to actually control the iOS keyboard, for good reason, Safari doesn't let you control how it pops up and stuff like this. So this is one of the things that you actually have to go to native code for and actually be able to handle the pop-ups. The other thing was there were certain times where the whole game would just pause on iOS in Safari. Like, when you were playing, there's like sometimes when you're playing sounds or sometimes when you're using the keyboard, like the game would just pause. And there was just like nothing you could do. So these were the kinds of things that like I ended up using Cordova for. And it ended up being really easy. I thought it was going to be hard because they were like, oh, you can build native code, and I hadn't used it before. And I was like, oh, cool, I've done Objective-C. I'm going to write all this Objective-C. And then I go on the internet, and I find that everything that I ever wanted possibly was already written in Cordova plugins. So you don't have to worry about doing Objective-C or Java if you're doing an Android app. So for example, I use 2 plugins from Cordova. One of them is the keyboard plugin, which allows you to have like manual control of the keyboard. So you can actually like force the keyboard to pop up and do things. The other really cool thing that they have in Cordova is background audio. So like the audio actually plays on a background thread, and it doesn't interrupt your JavaScript. So like there's times like when you're playing like sound loops where like Safari was pausing. I was having issues with this, and like as soon as I put it in Cordova, and the really other nice thing about it is it's runtime enabled. Like you can just check it at runtime. So like if I run this app on my laptop, it doesn't use Cordova, and it just checks, and it just uses the native browser audio function. So it's really easy to kind of integrate into your apps, like just piecemeal. This is fun. So I just got this about a week ago. Has anybody gotten to play with Electron yet? It's quite new. Okay. Oh, it's just 3 or 4 people. Oh, good. Awesome. So Electron is kind of like the new hotness. It's kind of like the next PhoneGap. It's by the GitHub guys. And basically, it allows you to build native applications in JavaScript, both on OS X and Windows. It's not for mobile as much. It's more for desktops. But what's kind of cool is that it packages Chrome with your JavaScript application. So like, kind of annoying because like on iOS, you always have to have Safari. And I personally like coding in Chrome better than Safari, so like my app always just works better in Chrome. So this is kind of cool. And the other nice thing is if you want to package it up for the Mac App Store or the Windows App Store, you can actually create a binary to distribute with your application. And I thought, oh man, this is going to be a pain in the neck. This is going to be like all this hard stuff to set it up. And it turned out like you write one JavaScript file, and you write like 40 lines of code in the JavaScript file, and that's it, and you're done. And basically all the code is you're just defining how large you want the window to be, and like defining if you want it to be full screen or not. And it's just really, really simple stuff. And in like 5 minutes, you guys can have like a native OS X app. And it looks like an app. And what's cool is you can have like the nice icons and stuff like that, so it looks like it's like a native OS X app. In fact, I spent more time just trying to get code signing to work on OS X, which is a real pain, like to get in the Mac App Store. Like that was that was a bigger nightmare. So I'm going to give you a demo of this code, but I just wanted to wrap up and kind of bring back a couple points. I don't use JavaScript for my day-to-day work, but making a game in JavaScript was really easy. I think, I would avoid the cross-platform tools, honestly, unless you really have a need. Like I had a need to use them. I spent more time futzing with PhoneGap than I would have liked. And it's really easy to get going in a game, writing a game in JavaScript. Literally over a single weekend, you can put together a game. No problem. So I really encourage it. I would love to see some games for kids. I want to make some games around math. Like this is kind of what I want to do. This is all open source. It's on my GitHub, which I forgot to put a link to. But if you hit me up afterwards, I'll show it to you. And if you want to hack it, like if you want to make a Chinese version or a Korean version, I kind of want to do a Japanese one next, because I'm learning Japanese. But I would love to see some other people hack on it. And I'm going to do a little bit of demo because we have a few more minutes, and then I'll open up for questions in a few minutes. So cool. Let me just see how this looks on the screen. Cool. It's just nice. So basically, what I was talking about at the beginning of the presentation, where I use Gulp and Browser.js. So basically, I just run Gulp, and it sets up the entire environment, and it runs the app here. Cool. Actually, I don't have a Thai keyboard on this laptop, so I'm going to actually just change this to English for now. It's funny, when I was developing the game, I couldn't type Thai fast enough to actually develop the game, so I had to put an English mode in, because otherwise I was like, I could never get to the end of the level when I started out. It was really bad. It's really funny. Yeah, so what's kind of cool is, so what's cool is now, since we're in JavaScript, obviously, we have our normal JavaScript console and everything like this. Now, there are some things missing, right? Because this is just a giant canvas, so we can't do introspection. So if we inspect the element, really we just have a giant canvas, right? Because we're just doing 2D blitting. We're not actually using HTML elements at all in this. I mean, it's almost like making a game on a console in that kind of sense. But what's cool is now that we're in JavaScript, we can actually do things like we can inspect elements on the stage and stuff like this. Let me go. So for example, if we wanted to change the word in the middle of the running, we can do nice things like this, and we can actually check it. And this is, I love this workflow. So let me get out of full screen here. So yeah, so my development workflow is like this, and if you had 2 monitors, obviously. I found this so much better, because I used to like to hack on games in C++ when I was much younger, and this was always a nightmare, because you would want to tweak things. So you don't have a GUI editor, right? So if you want, if the monster is offset by 10 pixels, you don't have any way of easily doing that. You have to change the code, right? So every time you wanted to change the code, so if I wanted to make the monster jump here, we could actually just change it, and let's see if that he's going to, that would do that. It's not good. Yeah, so it just makes it really easy. So I really like this workflow, and I'm going to show you, there's only a couple thousand lines of code in this whole project, and it gets broken out pretty easily. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to open it up for a few questions now.
Yes. Thanks, Matthew. So any questions for Matthew?
Where did you get the artwork from?
For the what?
The artwork for the game.
Oh, I have a designer friend. Yeah, but what's cool is there's actually a lot of open source game artwork, especially if you're building 2D games. I don't have the links handy, but if you just Google 2D open source, there's actually huge communities, because a lot of people like to remake the old RPGs, like the Final Fantasy type games. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I had a question. Is there like a framework that's React-based for games? Because this seems like a really good, demo or use case.
Yeah, I don't know of one that React, but see, the thing is that I don't know if you would need to, because a lot of the stuff in like React or Angular are built around HTML elements. And this is like you're building a canvas. Like it's kind of like you're just doing 2D blitting. So like, I don't know if it would help you as much as you would think. There's not a whole lot to it, actually. Yeah.
Excuse me, I want to ask if you have any Electron solution, or you just write a hardcode for the text one?
Say that one more time?
Localization.
Oh, for the localization.
Yeah.
Well, localization happened to be easy because I live in Thailand, so I have lots of people that speak Thai around me. So I got it for free. It was pretty.
I mean, if you want to implement the game in another.
Yeah. If you want to localize the game. Yeah. So the way you would just do the localization is pretty easy, just like any other JavaScript app. I would probably just have a map of strings, and the way I've always done it is just have a map of strings, and then I just swap out the strings. Yeah, nothing fancy or different in a game.
Yes, from the last row.
Okay, sorry. The performance, when it was released, how was the performance on the devices?
Oh, so...
I mean, performance-wise, like, were you getting 60 FPS, or was it...
Yeah, so when I first wrote it, I didn't even try it on the device, and when I first ran it on the device, it was 60 frames a second until it stopped. Until it was 0 frames a second.
Oh, nice.
But what happened is I ended up figuring out there were certain trigger points in Safari, like when you talk to the keyboard, like it would just pause the whole thread. And that was the main thing, was just getting around these a couple bumps where it would. But like on an iPhone, either 5 or 6 is the main ones I've tested, it's 60 frames a second with almost no tuning, so it's good.
Hi, so like just what you mentioned, showed before, you can use the console, like the JavaScript console or the Chrome console, to modify things. So in a way, it makes people possible to hack your games. Is there a way to disable that or prevent that?
Well, okay, so the question is because it's JavaScript, can people hack the game? Yeah, of course, but that's kind of fun. That's why I like JavaScript, is because like, if somebody wanted to tweak it, like, sometimes I was finding something annoying, you could like skip a level in the game, right? It's kind of like when you were a kid and they had like the cheat codes for the game. But in this, the cheat codes are you actually learn something. So I mean, I think it would be very difficult to stop, right? The only thing you could really do is try to make it something on the server side if you had a server-side game, but yeah, I don't think you could stop it completely.
So if you're thinking of, say, making an educational game, how do you make sure that it's fun while staying simple?
Right. Oh, that's a great question. How do you make sure that the game is fun while simple? And that's why I think you got to throw away a lot of prototypes. So when we originally made this, we were making this with a graphic designer friend of mine. And what we did was we ended up taking like 10 different versions. Actually, I would like to show. We had 10 different like iterations. We did it in just like Photoshop. And we just played around. We were like, okay, would this work? Would this work? And we didn't even write any code. And even if you don't do Photoshop, I would just do it on paper and like just go through different concepts, because like we came through, I mean, this isn't even that complex of a game, but we went through like 10 different ones that just wouldn't make any sense at all. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you, Matthew.